Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bearded Reviews. This is Matt from That Matt 85, and I'm here with my friend Pat.
Hey,
And today we're going to be talking about a few news stories. We got our top tens of sports movies that we've seen, and we'll be talking about a couple of movies that we've seen recently. So, let's get started. I told you about one of the news stories we're talking about. The other one I'm going to pop on you really quick here. The Bill and Ted 3 trailer came out. Uh, and I don't know if you were expecting it to drop. It was surprising for me. It just one day I saw everybody was talking about it online, and I went and checked it out myself. Um, did it surprise you?
I saw that it came out. I haven't watched the trailer yet.
Ah,
I don't know if I want to see it, just because George Carlin isn't in it. But I'm interested. I'm probably gonna look up the trailer eventually. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I saw on Facebook that they released it. I mean, I they all the reports I had heard about it because the movie's been in progress for a while now. It sounded like they were gonna come out this year or next year. So it sounds like they're on par. He's got Keanu Reeves has got John Wick and Matrix both coming out next summer, so they need
yeah,
to push it out soon.
he's got a ton of movies. It'd be kind of funny if he released uh, starring roles on two movies in the same weekend.
He's
uh,
supposed to do that. I don't know if you know that he's supposed that Matrix. Last I checked, Matrix and John Wick
that would
4 were both supposed to come out the same day in July.
That would be really weird. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah,
talking about George Carlin, from what I've heard, George Carlin is supposed to have some sort of tribute in the movie, which would make sense because he was a big part of the movie. Um,
he's the best part of the movie. Movies, in my opinion, but yeah.
I have not seen the first two in a long time. And I remember at the time, I don't remember why, but at the time I thought I used to love George Carlin as a kid. I really don't remember why though. But yeah, I saw him in this movie. I liked him in this movie. Um,
He
uh,
was the train guy.
no, yeah, I know
That's all
that
I like.
too, but I never used to watch that show either. I really don't know why I knew of him so well.
I think the first time I saw him, he had a show on, I think it was Fox, very short-lived sitcom. I think I saw that before I saw Thomas noticed or even associated him with the
Thomas the
PBS
Tank.
show.
Yeah, I
I was thinking,
my I think my dad used to watch a lot of stand up, and I must have seen him a lot on there. Uh,
I saw a scene when I was like in high school.
anyways, with the trailer, it just kind of goes over really quickly. Just I guess conjuring up a little bit of plot for what's going to be in the movie, and it kind of has a lot of throwbacks, like seeing the Grim Reaper and going inside the time machine and everything. Uh, so you don't get a whole big sense of what's going on. It's just a teaser, and that's all they really need. Um,
Yeah,
what was weird for me was that uh, Keanu Reeves is so different now. Just not just like his perceived personality, but also like he. I don't know if it's just how he is or he's grown into his roles as an action star, but um, he has more of a rugged look now instead of a stoner look, and his voice is really
yeah.
raspy and low, like an action star movies would be. Not not the same kind of '90s cliched Valley Girl kind of accent. And at least in the preview, he still kept. It was like we were talking before about people in roles where you just see it as a person. He seemed more like Keanu Reeves, and less like his character from the movie.
Yeah.
So it's gonna, and I don't know if that's good or bad. So we're just gonna have to see, because I mean, it would be kind of weird. I watched I watched Encino Man the other day with Kirsten, or my wife, and it was really weird seeing how '90s that film is with Pauly Shore and everything.
Yeah.
Because that's it's really, I guess,
I'm
what
pretty sure that's Pauly Shore's. I'm pretty sure that's Pauly Shore's first like major role in a movie was
probably,
Encino Man.
but it's only been like 20 to 30 years ago. But man, that it seems so long ago. Nobody does any of the kind of weird junk that was in the
Yeah.
90s then. So yeah, if they were doing a movie now and it had all that in there, it'd be such a throwback. It'd be so weird. So kind of don't know what to expect, but I'm interested in the movie. I may go see it. Um, we'll have to see. I'll have to see more about it.
So
Let's
the
see.
thing with sequels that wait so long to do it's been at least 28 years since Bill and Ted the
Yeah,
Bogus Journey came out, 27 years. Like I, Anchorman took 13 years, Anchorman 2 or something like that. It's like 9 years or something, and it was still too long.
and
It's
Zoolander.
if you don't do it right after, it's usually crap. It's very, very rare that you find a sequel that waits more than 5, 6 years and it's actually good.
hmm
Uh,
And when they
the
do
only one I
that,
can think of is Before Midnight.
and when they do that too, it usually seems to be with movies like these ones that are very, very kind of goofy. Dumb and Dumber did it too. I never ended up seeing that the sequel,
Neither.
but yeah, they almost like they're released more for nostalgia than what's actually in it, or they try to replicate what they had before, except because they're trying to replicate it, it's not authentic and it doesn't end up coming across as well. Uh,
And jokes die fast. If you got running jokes from the same old movies, it just
yes,
doesn't work.
uh, but from the ones I have seen, because I saw the Zoolander 2, they weren't like super impressive, but yeah, and when I saw Anchorman 2 also, they weren't super impressive, but it
So
wasn't what I was expecting either. I just kind of more of like interested in what is this going to be like. So same thing here. I might see it because I'm interested in what the heck is this going to be like. I wouldn't expect it to be super entertaining, laugh my ass off or anything. Uh, but anyways, the other news story I had was last week we talked about AMC saying that they're pretty likely going to close down and not be able to afford a reopening. Well, a few days later they announced that they are reopening. They're not shutting down.
yeah.
Does that surprise you at all?
Kind of. Uh, Not because I think they finally realized that things are going to be opening no matter what is going on. Like states are going to open, and there's money to be made, and they need to make it while they can. But I think they were anticipating having to wait longer to open, and now that they're seeing the other place, we need to get whatever money we can before we sell. So I guess
That's
that
not,
makes sense from a business standpoint.
I hadn't thought of it that way. That's very true, and I'll tell you an example that I know of personally. Uh, when the Mills Mall opened up by us, it was a big deal, and I started working at it was like a souvenir T-shirt shop. Uh, they wanted to be there right when it opened up because that's when everybody was going there. About their plan was after like 6 months to just leave. They wouldn't be paying their lease anymore. They'd be out of there. But and it's true. Sales were really high at first, and people started not coming there as much. And man, that place is kind of tanked pretty fast, to be honest, to where it doesn't even exist anymore.
No,
But
I'm pretty sure they closed that.
it's the same kind of strategy where as soon as movies open, it will be, I'm sure, packed with people, especially with all these movies that were supposed to come out over time that are all going to be released in a short period. We could, like we just said, get 3 Keanu Reeves movies at the same weekend. You could do a back-to-back-to-back Keanu Reeves night. But yeah, you get that money while it's there, and then go ahead and sell. Because if you sell ahead of time, you're leaving that money on the table.
Exactly.
Oh, I was supposed to put on our graphic. Okay, so there's our AMC graphic. I think I had Bill and Ted on here too. Let me see if I got my Bill and Ted graphic. No, yep, there it is. Okay, so that's AMC. I'll probably edit this later. There's our Bill and Ted Face the Music poster. Okay, so anyways, now we're gonna move into our top 10 sports films, and these are
First,
films.
I wanted to say something real quick.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
On the AMC thing. Apparently, their beef with Universal is probably still real because I checked about the only streaming site that does not have the King of Staten Island is the AMC streaming site. So apparently, there's probably still beef with Universal one way or another. But
I could believe
throw
that.
out there that it is an update to people so they know. We
Yeah,
talked about it last week.
yeah. I assumed it would be, but like we said, it's just AMC's loss more than anybody else's. To be honest, if people want to
Oh
see those movies, they'll go to a theater where they can see it.
yeah, I'm sure this movie's gonna lose money. This and a few others that are coming out this next few weeks. But that's one of the biggest ones come out in the last
Yeah,
since probably onward.
yeah,
So AMC is losing out on money.
yeah.
Not as much as they would have a theatrical release.
Okay, so with our sports tops tens, these are based on the movies that we've seen. Um, so there might be like, oh my god, I can't believe you didn't put The Natural on there. I haven't seen The Natural, and to be honest, I read the book for The Natural, and I really didn't like it that much.
I tried to watch that movie. It was boring as all hell.
Yeah,
So,
the book was not only boring; it was just really weird. But yeah, we'll have a quick discussion of things that maybe we're surprised aren't on either of our lists too. But before we even dive straight into it, I'd like to say, is there anything about your list that you're surprised once you've made it? You know, I'm surprised this is on my list, or I'm surprised this isn't on my list, or just anything that surprises you about your list?
the number 10 surprised me that I chose that over a few others, but I go back and look at it. I've seen it so many times. It's so good. I haven't seen it in so long too. I went back and watched some parts of this one, so I'll get to that in a bit here.
That kind of reminds me.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that kind of reminds me of kind of like the NCAA tournament, last in first out, where you're kind of like, man, this one just barely missed the list, and this one barely made it on, and that cutoff point. I feel that same way too. With my list, I was surprised that I didn't have more hockey films on here because hockey is my favorite sport. I'm surprised I had so many racing films on here. I didn't realize it until I put it down. I looked at it, but that's the way it is.
I think I have like one for a bunch of different sports, and then 3 or 4 of the same one. So I'm definitely biased towards a certain sport. So we'll see when we get there.
Yeah, well, I was looking through a big list of all the sports movies, and it was separated by sport, and I was surprised, not really surprised, but once you see them all on there, you're like, wow, they've made so many baseball movies. Of course, it's the national pastime, and if there's more baseball movies, there's more chances of them being on our list. There's a lot of football movies too.
Football's kind of surpassed baseball.
Yeah.
In the national pastime in the last 10 years.
Well, especially if they're going to strike this year, I'm sure the football's just going to rake in even more dough. That's a different topic.
Basketball seems to be so steady. Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll get to our actual list. Did you want to reveal first your number 10, or do you want me to go first?
I said you can go ahead and go first.
Okay, so number 10 on my list, a movie I'm all but certain you haven't seen, is The Rocket. This is a hockey movie about Maurice Richard, the Rocket. It was, I believe, produced by Patrick Waugh, the famous hockey goalie. It's set in like the 1930s, 40s. It's a long time ago when Maurice Richard played. And besides just kind of being a biopic about him, it was also about how French Canadians were kind of discriminated against in Canada at the time, especially in Montreal. For example, at the Forum where the Montreal Canadiens played, there was a separate section that French Canadians had to sit in. They weren't able to sit in the regular sections with the English. The seats were cheaper, and they had fencing in the stands that were separating them from the rest of the audience. Maurice Richard was a French Canadian, so he on ice was disrespected a lot by the other players, sometimes by his own teammates. But at the time, he was one of the best players. And when filming this, they used a lot of modern day hockey players as bit parts in the movie, since a lot of it was on ice. so you had to be able to skate and stuff. So I got to see a lot of familiar faces from the NHL at the time that this was being made inside the film. It was very interesting. It was also half the film was in French, so it was made for a Canadian audience. It was kind of funny when I was watching. I could either turn the subtitles on, which would tell me what they were saying when they're speaking French, but it would also have the subtitles when they're speaking English. Or I could turn the subtitles off and not read it when they're speaking English, but then I didn't know what they were saying in French. But it was a interesting movie based in real life and had a lot more impact, I think, than some of the other hockey movies that I was considering, such as I'm not going to give away my list by telling you what's not on it, but this is my only hockey film that made my list. Anyways, we have your number 10 if you want to go ahead.
Yeah. I've only seen like one hockey movie that I can. Okay, it's not a list. Mystery Alaska is what I think of. It doesn't sound bad though. It's a movie.
I did like Mystery Alaska. We'll have to get to that for ones that didn't make my list later.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll go ahead and give mine. My number 10 is I got what I consider the showgirls of sports movies. Number 10 is Varsity Blues. It's very similar to Showgirls when you really think about it. It's another movie made today. It's like so much illegal shit in high school kids and Me Too culture stuff that would just not fly today. But it's 1998. It's all in fun. It's filled to the gills with cheesy TV actors, just like Showgirls was. You got James Vanderbeek, Paul Walker, the most B movie actor of all B movies, John Voight. You wouldn't know his name if Angelina Jolie hadn't gotten famous. And it's so cheesy and ridiculous, and probably the best work James Vanderbeek has done to date. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. It's so Texas and football and just I don't want your life. I can listen to that all day. James Vanderbeek Texas accent is life. It's just pure life.
I've never seen Varsity Blues myself, although I think everybody I know has seen it, so I don't know if it's something I want to see or not, but I do understand it being on your list. It's if it's still talked about so much today, then it's a good movie.
Yeah, it's one of those cult movies. Like it didn't do terrible when it got released. It wasn't like a huge bomb, but it wasn't like the greatest box office success of all time. It was one of MTV's first big forays into movies. It did okay, but it's become like Showgirls. It's become kind of a cult. Like Showgirls is considered like the godfather of B movies now. Like it's so fucking bad that it's the greatest fucking movie ever made to a lot of people. Like they made a whole movie about how it's become such a classic to some people. So it just tells you.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. That's in general a big thing is some of the things that are people love to watch, even though they're so fun to make fun of. That's become a kind of a genre unto itself. So number 9 for me, you mentioned guilty pleasure. This is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. It's Wimbledon. I have no idea, and I'm interested if you just want to mention right now. Have you ever seen this movie?
Is that the one with Kirsten Dunst?
It is.
I have seen parts of it. I don't think I finished it. I watched it with a girlfriend when it came out.
Yes, this is a romantic comedy, and as you can tell by the name Wimbledon, it's about tennis. I believe my mom was watching this at some point, and I happened to be in the front room. I started watching it, and I ended up watching the whole thing. I've played tennis in high school and after high school, so I mean that kind of interests me anyways. But it's not even really a good for a romantic comedy, to be honest. I mean there's Kirsten Dunst and Paul Bettany, and Paul Bettany is kind of a down and out struggling professional tennis player, whereas Kirsten Dunst is playing like the Serena Williams of women's tennis. And because the majors in tennis have both men's and women's tournaments at the same time, they kind of meet each other uh, on the tennis circuit. And like romantic comedies usually go, they hate each other at first, but then they start to like each other, and it has to do with their competitive nature because they're both professional athletes. And this romance makes Kirsten Dunst do worse. She was expected to win, but loses pretty fast, and they blame it on the romance. Whereas Paul Bettany's character, who's not expected to go anywhere, ends up winning Wimbledon, and they also blame that on the romance. And there's not a whole lot of romance. There's a lot of sports and a lot of surprising amount of focus on Paul Bettany's character and him, the intensity of him playing tennis and what it's like to be in the tournament, and the pressure that gets upon you, especially when you're an underdog in front of a huge crowd. They filmed a lot of these scenes. As far as sports goes, were filmed really, really well, really intense, really interesting. To where I was wondering, like, how did they film this? Did they really? Did they have a fake ball, or did they have some real tennis going on? I'm not exactly sure. So I'm not a big fan of romantic comedy in general, and honestly, you can throw away the romance in this. It's pretty shallow, anyways. And what you got left is kind of an interesting tennis sports movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have much to add to it, because I don't think like you said, you've only seen bits of it.
I think I watched the first half of it. What I remember, it was pretty basic romantic comedy stuff. I like Kirsten Dunst. I'm trying to imagine her playing Serena Williams now, and it would probably not go well. But
they don't really show her playing tennis much. Her role in the film is very secondary, surprisingly.
To Paul Bettany.
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I remember him being. I think he was the star of it.
Yeah, he definitely was. But I mean, Kirsten Dunst even has top billing on the poster. It's just, yeah, it's for a romantic comedy.
She brings that Bring It On. She brings that Bring It On money. That's why.
Yeah, she's definitely the bigger name. I mean, even today. Yeah. But that was my number 9. So your number 9, go ahead.
My number 9 is another guilty pleasure. Space Jam. When I first saw this movie, I was like 13, and I liked it just because it was Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan. I've watched it at least 3 or 4 times in the last couple years. I like it for a different reason now. That reason is marijuana, and just how tripped out my brain is. It is the most stoner-friendly cartoon aimed for children that I've probably ever seen. I love the whole this concept of, let's have Michael Jordan have to play a bunch of aliens with the Looney Tunes, and that's literally the only story development in the whole movie, and they just go with it for 90 minutes and have Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny shoot one-liners at Michael Jordan the whole time, and then just Bill Murray show up randomly and save the movie. That's literally the whole plot of this movie, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, not to mention it, the plot is kind of shallow, and I can imagine it being a stoner thing with, because Michael Jordan goes into the Looney Tunes world where he can do some cartoony things, and that is kind of weird to begin with. But I don't want to hit on it too much because it's on my own list further down, so I'll give my impressions more of it once we get to it on my list. So moving up on my list, my next film would be Speed Racer. This is live action Speed Racer, not any of the anime Speed Racers that might have come out. I saw this at the Dollar Theater because it was anime related, and I'm an anime dude. And I thought, hey, when it was coming out, I was like, wow, this looks so dumb and weird and different. But for $1, sure, we'll go watch it. And I was surprised how much I liked it. It it is so much different, but not necessarily in a bad way, just in a new way. Um, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like I've noticed this about John Goodman because John Goodman's in this. He plays the dad, which is a kind of a big role in general for this movie. Um, he's become a person to where he can even be in crappy movies, but he does a good job and it helps make the movie better. I feel that way about The Rock too. The Rock can be in some pretty crappy movies, but he ends up making the movie good just kind of by himself. Um, so yeah, this is a very futuristic setting with a lot of flashing neon lights everywhere and these death races, whereas the original like anime was just kind of like a regular road race that might be set on a volcano or some dangerous area. It wasn't as seizure-inducing or action-packed or fast-paced. This movie, it seemed kind of long, like it was like 2.5 hours long, and I don't know if that's true. But with how fast-paced the movie was, it went by really fast. The story had enough care to it to where I actually did care and found it interesting and cohesive. Whereas a lot of anime movies just kind of assumes you've watched the anime, you know what's going on. It's just going to dive in there really fast without the story making a whole lot of sense. It's kind of hard to describe without having you actually see it, but it's also a pretty trippy movie with just how many fast moving bright colored lights there is along with everything else that's going on in the movie. It's kind of like a techno rave in movie form.
Yeah, I never saw it. I saw one picture of Emil Hirsch in the outfit he wears in the movie, and I was done. But yeah,
I do know what you mean by that. I barely went to go see it, and I'm an anime fan. I wouldn't have expected you to have seen it, and I don't know if I'd suggest it to you either. I mean, if it interests you, try it out, and if not, probably don't bother. But I ended up liking it. So next we have number 8 on your list.
yeah. Number 8 for me is Dodgeball. It's one of as far as sports comedies in the last 20 years, it's probably the best. It's Ben Stiller as the villain here is every generic sports villain turned to 100 and added with that Ben Stiller charm. It's one of my favorite performances of his. Just him just being ridiculous and stupid the whole movie. So many great one-liners. Like nobody makes me bleed my own blood. It's just stupid, ridiculous nonsense that he probably loved every second of doing. And Vince Vaughn is one of his better roles too. I like how it's perfect Vince Vaughn role. He's the perfect everyday, probably secretly a closet Republican, lazy kind of guy. Like it's perfect for Vince Vaughn. A lot of like Justin Long made his career off this. One of Rip Torn's funnier performances. It's a lot to like here. A bunch of sports cameos.
Justin
The Lance
Tudyk's in
Armstrong
this
stuff
too.
does not age well at all.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, it does not age well at all. He was in a movie a couple years ago that Andy Samberg did on HBO Go, and this was a couple years after the whole controversy with him, and it's still no go. Like,
Yeah, I was going to say Alan Tudyk playing Steve the Pirate does such a good job too.
oh yeah, he did.
This is one of the ones that was on the edge of my list. I did enjoy it when I ended up watching it. When it first came out, I was kind of like not having it. It's because especially at the time, I didn't like Ben Stiller. I like Ben Stiller in this movie, even if I haven't liked Ben Stiller in a lot of movies. I don't like Vince Vaughn, but I like Vince Vaughn in this movie. So it's kind of one of those things where at first glance for me, I'm kind of like, nah, I'm not watching that. But once I did watch it, I'm like, wow, I really appreciate this. It's very funny, very entertaining. It's a decent enough story. Didn't end up making my list though, but definitely understand why it's on yours. Number 7 for me is the same Space Jam that you were just talking about. So yeah, as a kid, I watched Space Jam. I was into the Looney Tunes and all that stuff. This was probably one of the first, or maybe even the first of these kind of like newer Looney Tunes movies and stuff where they modernized it a bit more and they added in kind of live action stars, and their humor kind of grew up a bit more. Danny DeVito did a voice of the main bad guy manager. Um, they had the Monstars that were modeled after the NBA players' stars at the time. Of course, you get to see Michael Jordan, who was super big at the time. Uh, it was, I mean, like you said, the plot is kind of nonsensical. Why is Bill Murray in it? Why is what's his name, Newman from Seinfeld in it? uh, but it doesn't really need it.
I think his name is Wayne Knight.
Yeah, so it's just like, what is going on? But it doesn't really matter, especially when you're a kid. You're seeing your Looney Tunes. They're having fun. They're being funny. They're throwing the one-liners out there, like you said. Bill Murray doesn't even honestly even fit the rest of the film. He's just kind of laid back, and he's doing his own commentary while he's on screen. He's just a Chicago dude, and so was Michael Jordan, and that's probably why he's in the film. But it's fun to watch. It's probably still fun to watch, even though I haven't seen it for a while. And as a kid, my family owned a movie store. This was one of the demo tapes we got. They sent us the soundtrack with it. Used to listen to the soundtrack all the time. Chris Rock does a song on the soundtrack, along with Seal's. What was that song he was famous for? Man.
Kiss.
I Believe I Can Fly.
That's not Seal, dude.
That's not Seal? Oh, dude.
Yeah.
No.
You probably shouldn't have brought it
up. Maybe it was. I swear to God, it's not.
No, it's R. Kelly. I'm telling you.
I'm looking at the Space Jam soundtrack as we talk right now. Space Jam. Yeah, you're probably right, but I want to embarrass myself. We have Fly Like an Eagle. That's it. Seal, Fly Like an Eagle.
Yeah, Seal's on there, but wrong song.
Yeah,
song. I couldn't think of the Seal song.
I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly is on there, which oh my God. I guess let's sidetrack here. So this is a personal anecdote. This was 6th grade. Our class went to a kind of like a overnight camp because we're in 6th grade, and that's what they did at the school. And they had a dance night where you're supposed to dance with a girl. And of course, at the time, everybody's all, you and stuff, but gathering the nerve. The first dance I had was to I Believe I Can Fly by R. Kelly from the soundtrack. Oh, man.
Dude, black people still play that song in church. It's ridiculous. That song is never going away. R. Kelly might go away. That song ain't never going away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the important thing is that R. Kelly's going away, even if this song isn't. But back on to Space Jam, I have to watch it again to see if it holds up. But I think it's just a fun time. Do you have anything to add since you did your own personal review here?
No, pretty much. It's just pure fun. That's why I like it, and I think that it's I like Daffy and Bugs Bunny and
Marvin Marsh and Taz.
Yeah.
I think Lola Bunny got her start here.
It's just fun.
Yeah, one thing to add, my list, at least, especially my list, it's mostly what entertained me, what movies did I like the most. I'm not going to sit down here and criticize, the plot points or plot holes that might be in Space Jam. That doesn't matter. If I had fun watching it, that's why it's on my list. When I'm doing my individual reviews, like I'm doing later, I'm sitting down more for that one and giving you the specifics on critiquing the movie. But for top 10 lists like this, it's whatever I find most fun. That's what's on it. So we have number 7 for you.
Yeah, number 7 for me is Cool Runnings. One of my favorite John Candy performances, and Dougie Doug, and can't think of the guy who plays the main character's name, but he's a good actor too. He's been in a few other things I've seen. Good cast, good story. One of the better true stories. It's weird. Like it's probably the only bobsled movie there is. But you say Jamaican bobsled, so people know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's and I really like the chemistry between John Candy and the four guys. What really holds the film together, and it's a good story. It's good, feel good Disney.
Yeah, this is also on my list, so I don't want to get into it too much, but it is just such a feel good movie. It still holds up today. Showed Kirsten it not too long ago, and she loved it. Even though she's not into the older movies usually, uh, but this one was good enough. She's not into sports movies either, but this one was good enough that she enjoyed it too.
Have you shown her Goofy movie yet?
Oh, she knows Goofy movie. We
I'm
watched that.
guessing she's not a fan.
We watched
That's
that.
a good movie.
she she uh she likes it. We're into if it's Disney, she's probably likes it. Disney live action's a little different, but Disney animated, she besides Cars, she probably likes it. Uh,
Yeah.
so next on my list would be number 6. Would be a movie called Eddie. I don't know if you know Eddie.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Oh, okay. Well, so Eddie, basketball movie with Whoopi Goldberg. I remember watching it when it came out, and I was young. Uh, I've seen it a few times, although not lately. Whoopi Goldberg is a fan at the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks had just been bought out by a crazy billionaire who's just doing crazy things to try and get people to come to the games, but the Knicks suck, which was true then, still true now. Uh, and one of his promotions was he was going to have a fan manage the team, and Whoopi Goldberg is the person that wins that. So she goes down. She wants to manage the team, but she's not really managing it. She's just kind of sitting on the sidelines. Uh, and the Knicks are doing so bad, and the coach is doing a bad job. So the owner fires the coach and decides, "Hey, Whoopi Goldberg, you're going to manage the team because why not?" So Whoopi, being a basketball fan but never not a player, not a manager, nothing like that, is able to pull the team together, rally around her, and I believe they make the playoffs and lose in the first round or something like that. But when you're the Knicks, that's an accomplishment, I guess.
See,
uh,
the funny thing about that, if I remember correctly, they weren't that bad when that movie came out. It came out like in '96, right? They
I
were in
it
the
That's true.
they
They
were in
had
the
Ewing.
playoffs like 95, 90. They made the finals in '94. So I mean, they weren't that bad at that time.
That's probably true. Yeah, now that I think about it, when they had Ewing, they were doing pretty good.
Yeah,
Uh,
so they lost to the Rockets in '94.
yeah. Uh, I thought the movie was really funny. I've always been a big fan of Whoopi Goldberg, uh, especially as a kid. I thought it was just a fun movie. Feel good at the end. Just pure entertainment value. I'd have to watch it again to get a really good critique on it, but I have fond memories of watching Eddie.
Yeah, I saw that with John at the old AMC theater. I think it was AMC, yeah, but it used to be up in St. Peter's. It used to be like in a shopping center across from my dad used to live. It's been shut down for years. It might have been in Regency. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was Regency now that I think about it. Yeah, me and John saw that. I remember it wasn't bad, but I don't think it was one of my favorites. It was pretty funny.
Okay, so now we're moving on to your number 6.
Yeah, my number six on this list is going to be Moneyball. Um, it's a mix of comedy and drama, and it's more of a behind the scenes focus on the game than anything else, and more about the details and the new statistics that are used today. And it's very different from most sports movies you'll see, but also has that same appeal where you get caught up in just baseball without seeing a whole lot played on the screen. There's like one big scene that focuses on one game, and then the most part, it's just replays from old games, like playoffs, from actual footage. And most of the stuff is behind the scenes with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. And I really like the dynamic there. Like, one of my favorite scenes in baseball movies is from Moneyball, and it's the fight between the scout and him over the old school new way of baseball. and him telling him he's gonna have to explain to his kid why he's working at Dick's Sporting Goods, and then Billy Bean goes on to become like one of the most renowned GMs in the history of baseball, and nobody knows what the fuck happened to that scout. That's just a funny scene to me. It's good when those real life things come out. But yeah, good, smart, well written, and well directed movie. That's not just a good sports movie, but a good film in general.
Yeah, again, Moneyball is also on my list, so I'm going to talk about that a little more in depth later. But totally agree with everything you said, to put it lightly. uh, so number 5 on my list is Ford versus Ferrari. Let me get them. There we go. Another racing film, and a newer film. I was again. I guess I gave my little quick review of it last week when we did our top movies of 2019. I enjoyed the sports aspect of it. I enjoyed the drama. I enjoyed watching Matt Damon and Christian Bale. I liked how it was shot and how it kind of put you in the driver's not the driver's seat the whole time, but kind of got you in with the action, especially for things that were set, earlier than say the 90s. Now everything's kind of uniform and slick and sleek. But back then things were a little more gritty, especially with racing. Some people had cars that were just a lot better because they were better designed. Whereas nowadays, as soon as somebody figures something out, it's usually stolen and copied by everybody else. So yes, Ford versus Ferrari made my top list at number 5.
And number 5 for me is The Sandlot. Um, it's been a lot of extreme success over the last 10, 15 years. It was a success when it came out, but it's just kind of ballooned even further to the point where some of the stuff is ruined because people will like walk around with those "You're Killing Me" small shirts. But for the most part, to me, it still holds up. I watched it, I think, last year when they did the documentary on the 25th anniversary on MLB Network, and it's still a great film. I love the dynamic between the kids. I like the storyline with the kid and trying to adjust to life without his dad. I like the whole uh, storyline with him being terrified of the dog is just hilarious to me. It's just classic kid stuff. And the scene with Squints and the lifeguard is to this day, one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a sports movie or any other movie. It's a great scene.
Yeah, I was talking to you about it before. The Sandlot, I had seen it when I was a kid. I'd seen it a few different times, and I've seen bits and pieces of it over and over because it is on a lot, either people's
Yeah,
personal television sets or being broadcast, like you said, MLB Network or on other channels. It just never hit me for whatever reason. It never really hit me uh, the same way it hit everybody else. Like the first time I watched it, I was interested in it, watched it all the way through, and it was kind of like, huh. But I never laughed as hard. I never got as sad as everybody else that was watching it. I don't really have a big explanation why. It just didn't hit me that way for whatever reason. As a kid, I didn't play sandlot baseball, but I played a lot of wiffle ball in our front yards and in the streets. So maybe it's a little bit different, I guess. But I do understand, yeah, why it's people like it, and understand that it is, like you said, still super popular to today. I think they're supposed to be creating a Sandlot uh, TV series, from what I heard.
yeah. I
Uh,
think it's gonna be on Disney. I think it's gonna be on Disney Plus. Actually,
yeah, so we'll have to
I
see
don't know.
how that
Yeah.
goes. Uh, Number 4 for me is a movie called Redline. And I'm almost certain that you have not heard of this, Pat. It is a anime movie, uh, fully animated, and yeah, from Japan. uh, this is a racing movie that's set place in outer space, and it is so high energy, adrenaline pumping, insane, crazy, trippy. Uh, it is hilarious. It's got interest in. Sorry, not explaining this well. It's very funny. It's hilarious. It's got interesting, trippy visuals. It's got an interesting storyline. Maybe goes on a little too long, in my opinion. The main character, who's pretty much the only main character in the film, is very interesting and kind of pulls the movie. So it it's just kind of like you're watching it and you're like, whoa, what's happening? What's going to happen? And what just happened the whole time you're kind of watching it, not in a too confusing kind of way, because the main plot is just he's in a race, he wants to win the race. How's it going to happen? I don't know if you ever watched the old Hanna-Barbera cartoon Wacky Racers, where they just had old cartoon characters. They all had themed cars and they raced each other every week. It reminded me a lot of that in a super modern, high energy anime way, because there's a bunch of wacky cars and they all do wacky things.
I've never seen that show, but it sounds dope. I'm not gonna lie, it sounds like a cool show.
You'd have to look it up. I'm sure it's on YouTube. They have the
I would probably
Flintstones have
like
their
that.
own car. The Mystery Machine is the Scooby Doo car, and they have the bad guys have their own cars. But this is a movie I would recommend to you just because of how crazy it is. I don't know if you'd ever get to it or anything like that, but if for some reason,
I'll write it down.
yeah, it's worth checking out, especially because you can find anime online pretty easily. Just by how crazy it is and entertaining it is, whether you're into anime or not. It's just a fun time and a thrill ride of a movie. Number 4 for you.
My number 4 is Major League. This is my third baseball movie in a row. This is my favorite baseball movie. It's just the essential 80s sports movie, and the fact that it's baseball just makes it. I love baseball as a kid. The first time I watched it, I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. I still love it to this day. I haven't seen the original in a few years, but Charlie Sheen and Wesley Snipes together, really good chemistry. I really like Tom Berenger as the grizzled old veteran catcher. I forget his name, but the guy who played Roger Dorn. Oh God, what's his name? He's more famous than some of those other people too, because he's on LA Law. Oh, I can't think of it. But he was a good dickhead star player, but Bob Uecker steals every scene in that movie.
That's
He's
true.
the best part of those movies. Every second he's on camera in both those movies, the first and second one is gold. Every time I think of those movies, I think of him. So yeah, that's my number 4.
I've seen Major League, of course. That was really close to making my list. I do love it too. Just so much fun, like you said, essential 80s, 90s sports movies. It just a whole lot of fun and wackiness, and then getting to see the team come together for the win is always fun. Those movies, along with Angels in the Outfield, were all close to making my list, but didn't make it. Number 3 for me is going back to Moneyball. You explained it very well, but Moneyball, not just as a sports movie, but as a movie in general, as a movie that's looking at the behind the scenes in sports, that's explaining, like you said, the changes from the old guard to the new guard in sports. It's also explaining this very well to you. Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt, Philip Seymour Hoffman all do a great job in their roles. But it's not even just about sports. It's about Billy Beane as a person, what he's gone through as a former player who didn't make it, to trying to do the best at his job. Also trying to balance family life. Also trying to balance not going insane with the amount of pressure that he has on him. And just with the way it's filmed to, along with the music, to really bring out the best emotions and the highs and the lows. It's filmed so that even the small things that it shows you at the beginning of the movie still play a part in the middle and the end of the movie. It's not just a scene and that's the end of everything that you're seeing. Stuff that you see throughout the movie just intertwines all throughout the rest of the movie. It's just an expert movie in general, and a very interesting. I'd say if you're not into sports, it's interesting as a movie, as a look at this person. But if you're into sports, it's really interesting in going in depth behind the scenes at a real life event that occurred and real life people that occurred. Even if it's Hollywooded up a little bit, it's just a mastercraft, basically. Can't say enough about it, basically. But since you already talked about it, we're just going to go ahead and move on to your number three.
Number 3 on my list is Remember the Titans. It's one of Denzel Washington's probably more well-known movies of the last 20 years, and everybody talks about him. But Will Patton really gets slept on here. It's probably his best work. He was my favorite part of the movie. Denzel Washington's great. The scene where he gives the banana to the racist coach that called him a monkey, classic. That's fantastic stuff. But it's a great story. A lot of people who are no names in have become famous now, like Ryan Gosling and Donald Faison from Scrubs, and to a lesser the lesser degree, Ethan Suplee, who found some fame on My Name Is Earl. Good movie, good message. With the racism, but it's realistic to the story, and it's a good message that doesn't override the sports and the entertainment. Fine line movie, great movie.
Yeah, I haven't. Surprisingly, I haven't seen Remember the Titans. I know it's a big movie for a lot of people, so would I watch it? I guess at some point. I don't really have a whole lot of interest in it, but if I was in the mood for a football movie,
you would. I think you would really like this one.
I probably would.
I really do.
Okay, so number 2 for me is a movie called Shaolin Soccer. I know I know you haven't seen this. I'm wondering if you've heard of it before.
I have heard of it. It's been referenced in a few TV shows I watch.
Well, Shaolin Soccer.
Mainly Weeds.
Yes. Shaolin Soccer is by Stephen Chow. You might know him as the director, creator of Kung Fu Hustle, among other movies.
I actually did see that movie. That's a good movie.
Yes, it's just kind of funny. I remember when this came out, and I was kind of like, this is a Chinese movie, and I was kind of like, Shaolin Soccer, that's a stupid name. This movie's probably stupid. I'd heard enough of it to where I was surprised how many people I knew that was talking about it. I didn't realize when Kung Fu Hustle came out that it was the same person. I loved Kung Fu Hustle. And eventually, I got a chance to watch Shaolin Soccer, and it blew my socks off. It was it's so funny. First of all, so the premise is there's a Shaolin temple, and they're dirt poor. And they're all kung fu experts because that's what Shaolin monks are. So they decide they're gonna play soccer. So they play soccer and they use their kung fu abilities, which is like superhuman strength, being able to jump yards in the air every time they kick the ball. It's like a cannonball. They use all these special effects, and they use it very well to where it looks, it's superhuman, but it looks like it fits in with the story. And they basically just kind of take over the Chinese soccer world until eventually a rival monastery, some monks, make a soccer team and go against them and start beating them up at their own game using their Shaolin powers. The story is kind of interesting. The characters are fun, but what's mostly the thing about it is how funny it is. It is like a soccer version of Kung Fu Hustle. If you've seen Kung Fu Hustle and you like it, it is kind of more of the same in a different setting, and to me, that's a good thing.
See, I like him. I really like Kung Fu Hustle. I've heard of that movie. I've meant to check it out, but I haven't gotten around to it.
Okay, so we'll move on to your number 2.
Okay. At number 2, I've got Basketball. I rewatched this a couple weeks ago on Netflix. I don't care what anybody says. It ages well. It's horrible from a vulgarity standpoint, and there's a lot of jokes that would not be made today. But at the same time, it's all in fun. I don't think anybody is aimed at like viciously. It's the Sky Airplane and the Naked Gun movies. It's meant to be silly and stupid, and it's one of my favorite silly comedies. I love the sports. I love that you can go back and you can just watch these all these sportcasters and famous athletes who wish they were never associated with this movie because the stupid stuff they agreed to do they probably regret. Like Bob Costas telling someone to fill his nipples. Like I like that kind of stuff. And Trey Parker yelling, "I'll have your fucking ball at Reggie Jackson" is another great line. I just love the silliness and ridiculous. I like that it's a fake movie about a fake sport. I just like the whole premise of it. It really kind of is like a Monty Python style comedy for sports, and I
Yeah, I had seen this movie at some point. I forget exactly how or when or why. Uh, it was funnier than I expected it to be. It was more poignant in its lampooning of professional sports than I expected it to be. To be honest, there were some
yeah,
things that they pointed out that not just were funny, but were like real topics. Uh, as well as creating the sport like basketball. If I know myself included, a lot of people kind of invent their own sports using what equipment they have, uh, usually combining a couple of sports they already know, and that's kind of what this is in a fun way. Like you said, it's incredibly obscene, but that's kind of just the humor that they have when they're doing anything. Obviously, Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
I said it's one of the few things they didn't direct. They didn't have any. I don't think they had any creative in that movie. Trey Parker and Matt Stone. I'm pretty sure they just were stars of it. They may have been involved in the writing, but I don't think they were credited.
That's pretty interesting. I wouldn't have guessed just based
It's
on knowing what they do and knowing the movie.
I forget his name, but the guy who directed Airplane and
Naked Gun.
the Naked Gun movies did
Yeah,
these.
I don't know his name either, but he's credited on the poster.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's going to bring me to my number one movie, uh, which to me was Cool Runnings. I know it was on yours. This holds up really, really well today, especially for a number of reasons. Just besides being a really good movie, the Jamaican bobsled team, it still shows up to each of the Winter Olympics. This last Olympics, they got crowdfunded. The the dude that plays Yul Brynner, or not the dude, but the dude that Yul Brynner, the character Yul Brynner is based on, and the main dude, they did two-man bobsled. Um, but yeah, again, another kind of based on true life. Uh, like you said, John Candy is amazing in it. They have such a good, uh, I guess, chemistry. All of the members in John Candy together. It really gets you into feeling like they're actually a team, the kind of team that you got to beat in the sport of bobsled. Um, and man, it's kind of an ultimate underdog story. Helps you kind of learn about the sport as you're watching it and see all the different hurdles that have to be overcome, not just athletic wise, but trying to be accepted socially, trying to on a personal level for a lot of them, trying to be allowed to try and be Olympic athletes. Uh, so yeah, just the final scene in the movie where they crash and burn, and their dream is gone, but they still get up and they still finish anyways. It's just such a touching scene. Um, this is a movie I could watch over and over and enjoy it all the time. It's funny, it's sad, it's got heart. It's just an interesting to watch, uh, and it's got that little slice of '90s nostalgia that I enjoy too. Uh, I know you already talked about it, but anything to add?
Yeah, it's the thing I really like about it is not really a whole lot of movies like it. It's a different story, a different. You don't see a whole lot of bobsled movies. It's unique and fun.
Yeah, when I was like I said, I was looking on different movies that are separated by sports. I think this might have been the only bobsled movie.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Okay, so let's move on to
Talk about
your
bobsled. Yeah.
number one.
My number one is a total opposite feel of yours. My number one is actually my favorite movie of all time. Raging Bull, directed by Martin Scorsese. It's a boxing movie. It's based on the boxer Jake LaMotta. It's one of my favorite all time dark dramas. It's like I said, it's my favorite movie of all time. It's dark. It's not the easiest movie to watch, but once you get into it, it's so good. The cinematography is my favorite cinematography of any movie. I love the look of this movie. It's shot in the 80s, and it's meant to look like it's from the 40s and 50s, which is when most of the story takes place. And it's just so fantastically done. It's the best work Robert De Niro's ever done. One of Joe Pesci's best performances. It's the movie that kind of made Scorsese took him from the a star director who could be big name sometime with Taxi Driver, a big hit to the future of the film. Uh, like the best going. Uh, I just love the whole feel of that movie. It holds up today.
Yeah, Raging Bull, another movie I haven't seen, but from a lot of people I've heard, it's not just their number one sports movie, but their number one movie overall, just like it is for you. So I can imagine, and I've started to appreciate Martin Scorsese's films a lot more lately. Um, so I imagine I might get to this at some point because I'm interested in it. I'm interested in sports. And again, if it's a lot of people's favorite films, it's a good chance I'm gonna at least like it.
Yeah. If you don't care for black and white, it's hard to watch. But like I said, it's so well done. It looks like it's supposed to for the 50s and the 40s. And some of the fight scenes are so well done. It's the fight choreography and the cinematography behind it, and the editing. Oh, it's some of the best shot scenes you'll ever see.
I imagine, yes, I can imagine I'd like it. Sometimes that isn't enough motivation for me to go see it, but I think in this case, I probably will put it in at some point when I get a chance.
I
So
think it's on that.
yeah, you should probably be streaming somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so that closes out our top tens for this week. We're gonna move into a couple of individual reviews. We'll go ahead and start with mine. I had watched the movie Tolkien. There we go. This is directed by a director named Dom Karukowski. Stars Nicholas Hoult, Lily Collins, Colm Meaney, and these are probably all people you haven't really heard of. That's because this is a Fox Searchlight movie, which means it was kind of independent until Fox picked it up. It's made on a budget of $20 million, which is very, very small. This was released in the U.S. May 10th, 2019. What's funny about that is I've been hearing about it since last summer, and I was looking forward to seeing it once it came out. I didn't see it actually come out. I didn't realize it had come out. I thought it was being delayed because of coronavirus. When I looked it up, I'd seen it already came out, so I was able to stream it. It's on Hulu. If you have Hulu, it's on Hulu for free, or you can rent it from a few different places for $10. With that all being said, I'm also apparently it's grossed $9 million worldwide. I'm really surprised that a J.R.R. Tolkien biopic has grossed only $9 million. It was, I mean, it's Fox Searchlight, so it wasn't like hyped to the max.
Yeah.
But people who know movies and people who know Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien knew about this movie, so I'm surprised it didn't get more play. From what I read, it hit something like 1,900 theaters in the U.S., which is a pretty wide release too, I believe. Anyways, though,
For India, it's not bad.
yeah. So this is a biopic for J.R.R. Tolkien. It's focusing on his early life, not just his childhood. In fact, not a whole lot of his childhood, but more of his young adult life. going into when he served the British Army in World War One, and all the different inspirations that went into him making the Lord of the Rings books, as well as explaining who he is and why he's an author and all that. Uh, so some of the thoughts I had was this was another World War One movie because this came out around the same time as what was the other one called? 1917. So yeah, this came out around the same time as 1917, another World War One movie, which is not a usual subject. I mean, how many World War Two movies have there been? There hasn't been that many World War One movies, at least not in American cinema. Uh, so it's always interesting to kind of see that World War One trench warfare stuff, and they don't show a ton of it here. It's kind of just start of the movie and then, well, yeah, it'll start in the movie and the movie's kind of set while he's in the trenches, but it flashes in and out to his childhood for long periods of time, and then comes back to him in the trenches again. There's a lot of obvious examples of Tolkien being inspired. Sometimes they point it out a little too, directly in your face. Sometimes they work it into the cinematic for the movie as it's going on. So there'll be moments where Tolkien is like he has four friends and they're little British dudes, and that kind of inspires the four hobbits from the Lord of the Rings. And there's other times where like he's laying on his back in the middle of a trench, and there's the enemy on horses that's kind of riding over him, thinking he's dead, so they're not stabbing him, but he's seeing it in a blurred haze, and it kind of looks like the ring wraiths searching for the ring from the hobbits. So they have a kind of a mixture of pointing out what he was inspired by throughout the movie. Yeah, again, some of the examples are a little too obvious, but I think in general it's well done. I think, let's see, the dialogue was really witty, and at times when they're kids, it's kind of like, are they really that smart to be having this kind of witty dialogue? But at the same time, as an American, whenever people are speaking with a British accent, it always sounds witty, especially when this is set around the 1900s, and people were a little more proper, a little less, how would you say, a little less loose with their words like we are nowadays. You get to really see the characters, the main character Tolkien and his friends, as they're developing as kids and as friends, and on into their teenage years and young adults, and you kind of get to care for them as their different personalities. They have a lot of scenes of them doing different things together. They were they all really liked books, so that was their thing. Is they were a secret book society that met in a tea house and discussed books along with the other kind of stuff of being a teenager. Women and political going-ons and whatever else is going on in the area. They played rugby together and such. So as they grow, you kind of get to know them, and you like them and see them grow too. The way the movie is presented seems a little more theatrical than realistic, just with some of the coincidences that happen and the way that scenes are playing out and the dialogue being so witty. It seems more theatrical and exaggerated than literal, but that's fine with me. It made it more interesting, I think. The cinematography in it, I think, was shot really well. It wasn't just plain wide shots to wide shots. There were different types of shots to try and portray action scenes and get close in for intimate scenes, and again, trying to show off some of the visuals for what might have inspired Lord of the Rings, the different shots that kind of coincide with that. There's a bigger picture, the bigger picture being how Tolkien was inspired, but there's a lot of smaller stories that are going on inside this too, including the lady that he's in love with, the different friends he made, the his need to continue his education, or else he's going to have to become a priest. Him being shipped from South Africa to England without his parents. Um, there's a lot of different things going on. I think it kind of all adds together well instead of being lost or complicating things too much. I think, especially for having a small cast, that um, the actors all do a really good job being themselves, being their characters, portraying who they are. And besides the looks, some of the actors that play them as kids as compared to the actors that play them as young adults, I think they keep the tone and the personality well when they transition between the ages like that. Um, yeah, by the end of the movie, you're really rooting for the characters. Like I mentioned, there was a bit of a love story. It wasn't as interesting, but I'm not sure if it was meant to be. It was just showing, you want to know who did he marry, how did he marry, uh, what kind of impact did that have, and it kind of went through it pretty quickly, but I think that's fine. It kind of has a weak ending where it just kind of goes up to the point to where he starts being involved in World War I, and then it flashes forward really quick to he has a couple of kids, he's married, and he's written his books, and then it kind of flashes over what happened to all of his friends. Uh, so like a couple of his friends had died during the war, and another one had lived a long time, but they weren't really that close, even though they were his kids. Uh, this movie got panned a bit by critics and such. I think that's mainly because when you get to something like J.R.R. Tolkien, you have a lot of purists that need things to be absolutely correct. You can't have anything Hollywooded or exaggerated for dramatic effect, or else people are going to get annoyed by it. Uh, yeah, so some things that hit on was his love for language, his love, his really the friendships he's forged, his love with his wife, and his experiences in the war. I found it really intriguing. It made it hard for me to write notes as I was watching because I was so interested in what was happening on screen. But I think that's a really good compliment to be able to give a movie. Although nothing stood out as amazing, I think it was really solid, really interesting. So I'm giving it a 4 beards out of 5 beards review.
See, I'd be interested. I don't really know much about Tolkien. I've seen most of the Lord of the Rings movies. I think I've seen all but the first one, and I've seen all of the Hobbit movies, and the Hobbit movies are really good. I didn't get into the Lord of the Rings when I saw that, but that was years ago when they first came out.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested in hearing about his life for sure, so I might check that out.
Yeah, like if you have Hulu, it's free. Otherwise, you can probably find it places. Wink, wink. Uh,
Yeah,
so you also have a review up.
yeah. I am doing the King of Staten Island. The King of Staten Island is the sixth movie Judd Apatow has directed. Before this, it was not. He did 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up and Funny People. He also did This Is 40 and Trainwreck, and this is his first movie in 5 years. It stars Pete Davidson, Marissa Tomei, Bill Burr, Maud Apatow, and Belle Powley. It's a comedy based loosely on Pete Davidson's life. Pete Davidson is a pretty famous comic from SNL. He's probably more famous for dating Ariana Grande than anything he's done on SNL, but he's pretty popular on SNL too. But this is kind of his life story and tells of his well-known problems with mental health issues. And it goes into more detail about his father than he's done in his stuff. Or he's talked about him in interviews and he's talked about him a little bit on SNL, but it's definitely more in depth. It's a fictional character, but you can definitely tell. He says like 70% of the movie is based on his relationship with his dad, so you can definitely tell this is a tribute to his father and his love letter to his mother and his real life, his mother and sister, who have to deal with his shit during him not being able to really fully recover from his dad dying. And the character in this movie that plays his dad did not die in 9/11 like Pete Davidson's real dad did. So there's definitely differences, but and also Steve Buscemi's in this too in a small role as the fire captain, a small memorable role, and he tells stories of Pete Davidson's dad being a kind of a cokehead and a lot of other stuff. So one of the things I like about that is they memorialize him. They don't overdo it like some movies do with the dad, where they make the dad out to be too perfect or he's the worst. It kind of mixes both. They kind of try to paint a picture of him without him being in the movie, and I think that's very well done. Davidson is really good here. I wouldn't say he's the best in the movie. Bill Burr is really good in here. Best work of his career. He's kind of known as being just the shit talking older brother or husband in TV shows or movies, and or the stupid criminal like he was on The Mandalorian and Breaking Bad. But he does really fine work here. Who's playing Marissa Tomei's new love interest, who plays Pete Davidson's mom. Maud Apatow is Judd Apatow's daughter, plays Pete Davidson's sister, and both his mother and his sister have been putting up with this shit for years. And the whole point of the story is them trying to beat in his head that he needs to get his life together, and he's just not getting it. It's showing you why he hasn't really recovered from the death of his father, and throughout the whole movie, it kind of shows him growing as a person. It's one of Judd Apatow's better films. I wouldn't say it's his best film like some critics have. I still think Knocked Up was probably his best film. The 40-Year-Old Virgin is probably second for me, and then this probably. But it's like all Judd Apatow's work. I enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done. The thing I really like here is there's a scene where he's directing his daughter. Judd Apatow is directing his daughter, and she's smoking weed and drinking. It's like the perfect. He's been directing her since she was like 10, because she was in Knocked Up, and probably younger than that. She was like 7 or 8 when Knocked Up came out, because that was like 13 years ago. So the first him to get directing her and his antics that have been in his movies for years is a little fun moment. But I also want to. She only has, I think, 4 scenes in the movie. She plays Pete Davidson's love interest. Breakout performance for her. I wouldn't. It's not something that's going to get Oscar attention or anything like that. But you're probably going to see her in a few things here. This has definitely got her name out. She stands out among a lot of names. Pamela Alton's another one. Like I said, Steve Buscemi. It's a really strong supporting cast. Apatow has a lot of friends. He works well with his friends. This is the same kind of thing he's done with Knocked Up, and to a lesser extent. I mean, from a not as good creatively. This is 40 is another one where he did that a lot. Just a bunch of his friends show up. That one probably heard of it by too much celebrity buddy, but it's still a pretty decent film. Like I said, I haven't seen any Judd Apatow movie I haven't liked, and this is no different. Like I said, this is probably the best one he's done since Knocked Up. It's a lot of fun. If you don't like Pete Davidson, you're not gonna like this movie. I'll just probably tell you that right now. It's a very Pete Davidson movie. It's his style that he's been doing on SNL for years. If you know Pete Davidson, this is the kind of movie you'd expect if they were making a movie semi-based in his life. So if you don't like Pete Davidson, I'd avoid it. Other than that, if you're open-minded and you like smart, inventive, if not the most original idea, inventively done comedy, you'll enjoy this. I gave it 4 out of 5, just like you did, Tolkien. Like I said, it's not his best work, but I would say it's the best thing he's done in over a decade. Very, very good movie. I enjoyed it very much.
I didn't know about this movie until I started seeing some trailers for it, and even just after watching the first trailer, it seems like a movie I want to watch. It's just a matter of if I get to it. I do want to try and get to it, and I think I would enjoy it. I don't know Pete Davidson that well because I haven't been watching SNL too much lately, but he seems fine to me. The movie seems like a good mixture, like you said, of drama and comedy, along with being more realistic and less fantastic. So I'm looking forward to it, especially with you giving it a good review.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say about it is really good music. I don't think there's a lot of original music in it, but the soundtrack is really good. I love the Kid Cudi track at the end. It's in the trailer, and the Wallflower song. I have kind of forgot about that. It was one of my favorite one-hit wonders of the '90s. The music is really well done. It's a fits the story well.
Okay, so that's going to finish up our episode today. We'll be coming back at you later. If you have your own top 10 list or even just movies that you think we left off our top 10 of sports movies, put them in the comments. If you liked our show today, give us a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more from us, subscribe to our channel. Hopefully, we'll see you guys again next time, and we'll see what we're doing then.